Good morning. On this Good Friday, I want to share a brief meditation. I hope it is helpful. Last week, we were looking at Jesus' ride into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. It was a time of celebration. Jesus was hailed as king. But when Jesus didn't do what the crowds were hoping for, they turned against him, and a few short days later were shouting for him to be put to death. But as we also noted, that's why Jesus came into the world, to be a servant, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so we see him submitting himself to the crowds and to the authorities as they looked for ways to kill him. Now, of course, we can all find ourselves the victims of circumstances that we cannot control. The present crisis is an obvious example. And we can learn from Jesus' self-discipline, his commitment to see things through, and his fortitude in the face of adversity. It was a lesson that his first disciples didn't follow. But what Jesus went through was also very different from anything we might face. First, there is the sheer size, the enormity of what Jesus came to do, to set us free from the power and guilt of sin. We can never understand just what Jesus went through. We see something of his anguish in the Garden of Gethsemane, when his sweat, we are told, became like drops of blood. The medical term is hematohidrosis. It's a very rare condition thought to be brought about by intense stress. And that gives us some idea of the suffering that Jesus went through as he approached the cross. And we see more of that anguish on the cross. Crucifixion is a brutal, inhuman form of death. And Jesus, in his humanity, experienced the full extent of its pain. But for him there was much more. We can't fully understand the idea of the Trinity, God the Father, Son, and Spirit, three in one. But what we can say is that there is a unity between those three persons. And on the cross, that unity was broken. The Son, who was one with the Father from the beginning, cried out to him, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, we can never know what that meant. We can never know what Jesus went through. But he went through it so that we don't have to. And the second big difference is that through it all, Jesus remained in control. Now, it didn't look that way to his disciples. The religious authorities may well have thought that at last they had the situation under control. But they were wrong. Right up to the end, Jesus could have ended the suffering. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus was arrested, his disciples wanted to fight for him. But Jesus stopped them and said, "Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" Jesus was not just carried along by events that somehow became out of hand. He was not a hapless victim. He shaped those events in order to achieve his purpose. Through it all, he remained in control, and that makes his sacrifice even more amazing, because he didn't have to go through with it. He chose that path of suffering and death for you and for me. He gave himself. He deliberately put himself on that path as a servant. He submitted himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. I'll say more about Jesus' death as well as his resurrection on Sunday. For today, though, I wanted us to reflect a little on what Jesus went through, the price he paid in order to ransom us from the guilt and power of sin. It reminds us of the seriousness of sin and the need to turn away from everything we know to be wrong. And it reminds us of the amazing love of God who stops at nothing to redeem his creation. The amazing love of a Saviour who gave his own life for us. And as we steal a glimpse forward to Easter Sunday, it reminds us of the hope that God can bring good out of even the most desperate of situations. Enjoy the day.